Right.
All right. Start recording. So thanks everybody for joining us this evening. We're going to talk about a quasi-judiciary body in Ontario called the Committee of Adjustment. And we're going to talk to you about some of our experience with it, but what it does, how you prepare for it, who helps you, what kind of things you encounter while you're there, and what kind of value you get from spending time with it. So I'm going to start to share my screen. I'm going to try to start to share my screen. Hello, hello, hello. Circle.
Okay, close the
Entire screen to share. And hopefully you can see my screen now.
We can.
All right. Okay, so now I've got, this is a PowerPoint presentation. I'm in presentation mode. So my second screen has my notes and my next slide and things on it. So basically I don't see anybody. So I'll try to remember to talk to the white dot next to my camera.
yeah, and
if somebody has a question, I'm not going to see you waving your hand. You're going to have to interject and speak up if you want me to or Maria to stop and address your question. So with that in mind, Committee of Adjustment, what it does and why you might need to use it. And we'll go through the presentation. If everybody already knows all this material, then it's not going to be kind of boring for you, and I apologize for that. But hopefully there's some nugget that you'll learn from going through the presentation, even if you know a fair bit yourself already. So this is the picture on this slide is from.
This is, I think, our property on 2253 Frank Bender. It was panel 2 of committee a couple years ago. They changed the members now, but that's how they looked before.
And it was all done online in the COVID age. So before COVID, all the Committee of Adjustment hearings were done in person. You had to go to one of the city buildings and go into a big conference hall or almost like a courtroom. They sat at the front, people came and presented, and then they handed down their decision and you moved on. Now it's done.
Now it's
so during COVID it was done online. Now it's actually done as a hybrid thing. You can be there in person or you can be online. So we'll go to the next slide.
Just before we move on, Maria, you mentioned panel 2. What does that mean for people in the room that are not familiar?
So
it's in the slides.
Okay.
It's in the slides. You're only a couple slides into.
Okay. Well, hold on for now.
All right. So here's what we're going to try to cover this evening. What does the Committee of Adjustment do? Why would you want to go to the Committee of Adjustment? What benefits in it for you as a real estate investor? How do you prepare for it? So I'll give you some hint. You'll get some hints about what they do as we go through the agenda. How do you prepare for a minor variance hearing? Some of that material involves what's called the 4 tests. So we talk about that. How do you prepare for a severance application? What consultants and professionals do you use to help you prepare for a Committee of Adjustment hearing? How do your neighbors contribute to a Committee of Adjustment hearing? And then we're going to talk about what are some conditions that can be included in an approval of a severance application. So that when we've gone through those items, you should have a much better understanding of what the committee is, how it works, and what it can do for you. And the picture here is that was our
first Committee of Adjustment before
our first Committee of Adjustment,
yes.
Before the pandemic. And it was a property on Baseline Road that we demolished and built a semi-detached with basement units, and we needed some variances for that. So,
and on the picture you can see me. I would just stick the public notice to the ground. Usually, before Committee of Adjustment, you should notify your neighbors. Committee sends themselves letters to all the neighbors within 60 meters of your property, and you're supposed to post this notice publicly visible on your property 2 weeks before hearing.
Yep. Okay, next slide. So what is the Committee of Adjustment and what does it do? So, and the picture on the top half of the slide, I'll just mention it briefly first. This was from a meeting just actually Tuesday last week. Yeah. We were there for a minor variance that unfortunately we had to postpone, and we have to come back. The city had some issues with our plans for parking, and we have to update our minor variance application and go back. And that's not an uncommon thing. That happens fairly regularly at the committee. But here you can see that the meetings are now done in person as well as online. We participated online, which is where the screen grab comes from. Yeah, kind of. Actually, it came from YouTube. The committee members, you see the four of them there. And if you look at the screen in green, that shows the view from the committee looking out at the
audience.
Yeah, the audience essentially. And the view from the bottom right is the view from the back of the room looking forward, and you see the four committee members sitting in the at the desk, I guess, at the front.
Some staff also sitting on the left.
On the left, that's city staff. They support the applications that are coming forward and provide input from the city when the committee asks for it. The people in the general audience are usually neighbors who want to speak when it's their turn.
Well, applicants as well.
Applicants too, that's correct. That's correct. If you see over here, these three people on the left, they were there to speak to our variance, which was postponed, so they all got up and left. So Committee of Adjustment is convened by the local municipality or county, and its job is to hear and adjudicate applications related to minor variances and consents. Consent is when you want to divide a piece of land into smaller pieces of land. Their authority is derived from the Ontario Planning Act, and there's the description of the three panels. In Ottawa, we have three. One for the urban area, two for the suburban. Panel one is for the urban areas, panel two is for the suburban areas, and panel three is for the rural areas. Anything else to say there? No, that's pretty good description. Yeah. So I'm going to talk to you about what a minor variance application is now. So minor variance applications are put forward when you as a property owner are trying to get an exception or a change or an allowance that is different than the zoning bylaw stipulates for the piece of land that you own. And the picture that's here is from one of our first minor variances, and it was a minor variance tied to a severance. The lot that we had purchased, we were severing to put semi-detached properties on, and the requirement of the zoning was that we had 9 meters of width at the front of the lot, and you can see we had 8.95 meters on one side, 8.82 meters on the other side. So we were looking for basically a 2% reduction in lot width measurements on one side and a 0.5% on the other. That's you normally get that by going for a minor variance application. When the committee considers your minor variance application, they apply what's known as the 4 tests, and we'll talk about those in a couple of slides. Because the other thing that you can do at the Committee of Adjustment is ask for a consent to sever. And consent is required when a property owner wants to divide his land into smaller pieces than the ones that are currently existing. You'll present your case to the Committee of Adjustment. They will listen to you, and they will grant or deny based on factors like conformity with the official plan, zoning bylaws, impacts on the community, and
personal preferences.
And to a certain extent, yes, personal preferences. We've experienced that before. I'll actually just speak to that briefly. The people who are appointed to the Committee of Adjustment, they don't receive all that much training. In fact, almost none. So some of the people on the committee will have a background in land use and planning. Quite often, there are a number of people there who have that experience or education, and there's no formal education that comes with being appointed to the committee. So you'll have to deal with people who will react on their own emotional views on whether something should be done or not, and that can be frustrating. So there. Why would you want to go to the Committee of Adjustment? Or to put it another way, what are the benefits of obtaining a minor variance or a consent to sever? So there's a pretty healthy list of these. And some of them are pretty self-evident. Increased development potential, particularly for severances, but also for minor variances if you get a variance for setbacks or for height. Higher property values, a larger building on the property is worth more, or taking a large piece of land and dividing it into 2 smaller pieces of land increases the value quite a bit. Enhanced marketability, again, 1 big piece or several small pieces. And you can get variances for other things as well, like parking requirements and things like that. So that can affect your market. Cost savings, again, if you get a variance that says you don't need to provide so much parking, you can save money on your development project by doing that. And sometimes there are requirements for things you have to do, and you can vary those and thereby save some money. Faster approval process. It's not that the Committee of Adjustment is necessarily fast, but it's faster than asking for a zoning bylaw amendment.
Yes.
By quite a bit. It's also quite a bit cheaper than asking for a zoning bylaw amendment. So there's another opportunity to save money with it. Adaptation to market trends. That one's.
That one is actually, I think, what we are doing with our last one that we had to adjourn.
True. Yeah,
So,
we're responding to a need for different housing in the market, and using a variance to help us do that to a larger degree than the current zoning envisioned. Optimized land use, similar kind of thing. Diversification of product offering, that's similar to 6 in the sense of it allows you to plan to use your land in a more diversified ways.
Yeah, right.
Minimizing project risks. You do that by getting your severances early before you, or sorry, not your severances, your variances early before you you commit any significant capital to a project. Having said that, the Committee of Adjustment's not for free, but it is a relatively low cost means of getting permission to do things outside what the zoning bylaw would normally let you do. And community acceptance, I put that one there.
Well, community acceptance, I would say, because you have to go and talk with community,
neighbors,
you
yes.
will be able to put some things that they're worried about to some degree that they match with your desired outcome. And then they will be at least not that opposed to your variance. That's what I would.
Yeah, that's a
suggest,
good description. When you do go and consult with your neighbors, and we'll get to that in a few slides, not everybody's against it. But some people who say, well, I don't really mind if you do something like that, but I'd really like you to keep that hedge across the back of the lands because it keeps it gives me privacy from your from the property there now. I like that to stay. So when you have those discussions with your neighbors and find out the things that they're asking for, if they want you to change absolutely nothing, hard to comply with that. But sometimes their requests are quite reasonable, and they're things you might not have thought of on your own. And if you say yes to their requests to do things that are not, they're not consequential for you, but they'll turn what could be an objector into someone who doesn't have an objection. So yeah, community acceptance is actually something that you can derive from this as well. So how does one prepare for a minor variance hearing? And the note over here is not something you should do on your own.
Well, at least in the beginning. If you go through many of them and it's not very complicated, you can, but it also depends how much stuff you have on your plate, right? We tend to hire.
Yeah, we tend to have consultants help us do these things.
For this.
Okay. So when I put this slide together, I had this vision of animating it and all these different boxes up one at a time, but I couldn't figure out how to do that. So here they are all on the screen at one time, and we'll just go through them fairly quickly.
You think they have numbers at least?
At least they have numbers. These do. There's another couple boxes where they don't have numbers, unfortunately. So you have to have some understanding of your local regulations. either yourself or your consultants. If you bring consultants, and they'll definitely have this. If you're thinking to yourself whether this is something you should do, having an understanding yourself of the zoning bylaws is very helpful. You do want to talk to the planning department at your city. Once you have an idea of what you want to do, you can take some very rough drawings. I tend to use an application called GeoOttawa. I'll go find the address. You can actually draw in GeoOttawa some of the things you're thinking about. I'll put those things on, print the page, and then go have a chat with the planning department. Usually you end up with a development information officer, which are fairly junior planners at the city, but they're a good starting point for a conversation, and they're also kind of the gatekeepers. You want to go through them if you want to get access to a more advanced planner, a more senior planner who can help you actually do things. Hire professionals. That's so some of these people you don't really have a choice about. Like you can't make an application without a survey. So if you don't have a survey already, you need to hire a surveyor, because only a surveyor can give you a survey. You also need to hire, in most cases, I'm going to say 95% of the time, you need to have an arborist. They're not optional.
Say that, yes.
And there's a later slide where I list all of those professionals, but suffice to say, you need to bring those into the picture fairly early. They're going to help you put together a comprehensive application. They're also going to help you to a certain degree engage with the community and with your local ward councillor. The public notification, when you submit your application, the city will take care of doing the public notifications, except that you have to put a sign up. Maria spoke to that earlier, and there's a few pictures with us standing next to signs that are up on our properties. That's a required thing. If you don't do that, you don't get your turn at your hearing. You have to come back to the next one. Or the next, you have to drop to the next bottom, whatever it is.
I've seen a couple of cases where neighbors would take sign down.
Yeah, that
so
too.
You should guard your sign as well and attach it well
Yes,
to your property.
And take pictures of you. The reason why we have pictures of us with the sign is because those are all location and time-stamped photos from our phones. So if there's ever any debate about whether the sign was put up in time and at the right location, we can resolve that with those photos. You have to put together a planning rationale. You can do that yourself, although I would hesitate to try that on my own right now. Address the committee criteria. Then you also need to anticipate concerns and questions, and that's where your engagement with your community comes in, because you have some ideas what you're going to hear about when they speak. You go to the hearing. And then if things go well, you're done. And if things don't, sometimes you might need legal representation. I didn't bring it really up in the slides, but it's a point that not everything you take to the Committee of Adjustment will get approved. Some things get turned down. And if you believe, and your planning consultants believe, that it was a inappropriate thing for the committee to turn you down, that you should have been approved, you have an appeal process you can go through to have the decision reviewed and potentially turned over. They keep changing the name of that organization. I don't know. I think it's called the OMB now.
Tribunal.
OLT. Yeah, maybe Ontario Land Tribunal. Yeah. So it's like an appeals court essentially for decisions made by committees of adjustment.
And we have some statistical data that most of the rejected cases, if they get appeal in Ontario Land Tribunal, from Ottawa at least, they get approved.
Yeah, if it takes time and it does cost you some money, but they get approved. It used to be a delaying tactic. If you had neighbors with enough money, that they would raise an appeal to force you to postpone your development project. However, in November 2022, when the province enacted Bill 23, one of the provisions of Bill 23 was it removed the right for third parties to appeal decisions of the Committee of Adjustment. So if you, as the applicant, make an application and you're not successful, you have the right to appeal it. However, if your neighbors come and speak against the application, and then the application is subsequently approved, they do not have the right to appeal it, and they used to. So for like $300 or $400, they could file an appeal and bring everything to a grinding halt. So that they no longer have that right. Next slide. So I said we were going to bring up the 4 tests, and we're going to have a quick slide on what the 4 tests are now. And this is the criteria that the committee uses to decide if your variance is minor and if it's something that should be approved. It's also a key component of your planning rationale that you submit with your application, is addressing the 4 tests and showing how you comply or how you pass the test for each of the 4 tests. So here they are. We'll talk about them briefly, and then I'm going to talk about the picture that's on the slide as well. So the 4 tests are: is it minor? And minor, so you saw the slide earlier where I had a 2% request and a 0.55% request. And I mean, those are clearly minor, right? They're not substantial in any way, and they were the only variance we were requesting on the severance of the lot. So, but minor doesn't necessarily mean is it a small percentage or something. It's more to do with. My planner spoke to me about this last week, but I don't think I can do it justice. It's basically, are you trying to subvert the spirit of the zoning bylaw or the official plan as they were envisioned when they were written? So that's the test for: is it minor? Is it desirable for the development or use of the land? And that's fairly subjective. But it's your opportunity to speak to this is what the official plan says. This is what the zoning bylaw allows. This is what I'm doing and why it fits in with the anticipated use of the land.
Actually, next to so yeah, in my opinion, number 2, 3, and 4, they kind of very intermingled. And yeah, so here you have your option to bring your own arguments. Why is it desirable, and how is it aligns with official plan and zoning bylaws? Because often you actually a little bit pivot from the bylaws when you ask for the variance.
Yeah, well, by definition, a variance is asking for an exception to the zoning bylaw.
I mean. So yes,
and you want to be able to explain why the variance in this case doesn't subvert the intention that the authors had when they wrote that bylaw. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's speak briefly to this photo that you see to the left. So when we actually, that very same, when I said minor, I again brought up the, I'll go back to the picture. I brought up this image and said we were looking for very small exceptions to a lot width requirement. And one of the neighbors, when they came to us, when they came to the committee, they brought this image with them and they popped it up on the screen. And actually, if you look there in the corner, you can see that that's a bit from the presenter. And they said, if you give them a variance and allow them to sever this lot, they could build something this high on the lot, 11 meters high. And currently there's a 4.5 meter high building there, and we don't want them to be able to do that. So that was, we were actually impressed when we saw that image, but it didn't carry any weight or any water because we weren't asking for a variance for height. We weren't trying, and 11 meters is permitted. That's what's allowed on the lot. So for the neighbors to say they don't want an 11 meter high building there, as a neighbor, I understand that. However, they're asking the committee to not allow our severance because we can build an 11 meter high building there. And the zoning allows an 11 meter high building. So the committee can't prevent us from severing the land because it might be an 11 meter high building. We're actually allowed an 11 meter high building. And that's an example of someone saying that it's not minor when in fact it's not even an exception at this point. Okay, that takes care of minor variances to a degree. Now we're going to talk about how do you prepare for a severance application. It's also not something that you should do on your own, and the steps are virtually identical. In fact, they might well be identical.
You still have numbers?
I still have this isn't one without numbers. The next one,
okay.
One of the ones without have no numbers.
Coming.
So again, understand your regulations. So if you're trying to sever land into pieces that are not compliant for the zoning that you're in, you're going to need a minor variance to go along with that as well, and you should be able to justify why your severance and your minor variance are still in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw. And they often
go together, like this previous with the 11 meters high building was severance and minor variance. It often happens in Ottawa, in like College Ward area, and
All of the city, I would say.
all over the city where infill development going on, because the people trying to sever the lot into two smaller parcels where there is sometimes a little bit or sometimes a lot smaller than zoning allows, and then you need to go ask for severance and variance at the same time.
Yep. So complete a comprehensive application, engage with the community, public notifications again, prepare a presentation. So your presentation for a severance doesn't have to have a planning rationale behind it. Or let me rephrase that. The planning rationale or the description of what you're doing doesn't require any commitment to the 4 tests, because you're not asking for a variance. So
If
it doesn't.
if you don't
If
have
you're not
a-
asking for a variance, you don't need to talk about the 4 tests. You still have to address committee criteria. You're still going to get concerns and questions from your neighbors. You have to go to the hearing, and you have that option for legal representation if at the end of the day you don't get what you want. Excuse me. Or if you think it's going to be a particularly thorny application and you might want to have your legal representative there with you, that's an option as well. So on to the next slide. What consultants and professionals do you use to help prepare for a committee of application hearing? Some of these are optional, but most are necessary if you want to get a good and complete application, one that's likely to be successful. So I almost should have put the surveyor first, because he's not optional, or she's not optional, depending on who it is. Your land use planner. We use a consultant from Ottawa every time we go to the committee. They just know the ins and outs very well. Once this committee members have been there for a while, they actually know who they're going to have to deal with and what their particular biases are, and they're much more adept at addressing issues that are raised by your neighbors than you will be. Yeah, they're money very well spent in my experience.
Often neighbors are not so upset with them because it's not a rich developer or the person who's gonna build in their backyard. It's just a representative, and they might not be so agitated when they speak to them as they might be with you.
Yes, that has been our experience. You need a surveyor. If you don't have a survey of the land when you purchase it, it's not optional. You can't submit an application without a survey. Architect or designer, depending on what kind of a variance the nature of the variance you're asking for, you're going to have some representative drawings of your intended use and the required variance, what that looks like physically, and you can do that yourself again, although I wouldn't do stick houses. Your architect is going to be a required
Even for severance, you might need someone to put imaginary footprint on the lot.
Yeah,
that might be required for some. I forgot what they give you after that. How it calls again?
conditions.
So some conditions, exactly.
Yeah. If your variance is tied to parking or access to your lot, then you'll likely need some support from a traffic engineer or transportation consultant. In cases where environmental considerations are relevant to your variance or to your severance, you may need an environmental consultant, an environmental engineer, or some other body like I'm trying to think, like if you get concerns from the conservation authority, that's what I was looking for, then you'll need help from an environmental consultant to address those. Legal counsel, we've spoken to them a number of times. Community engagement consultant. So in our case, our land use planner and our community engagement consultant come from the same organization, but there again, it's people who are used to dealing with neighbors who are not happy about change that's going to come to their neighborhood. They're good at speaking to them in a way that doesn't inflame or aggravate them, and taking their concerns in and presenting your plans in as positive a light as possible. They're good value. Environmental planner or biologist fits in the same category as environmental consultant. Arborist, that's a key one. This is Maria's hot button.
That's a hot one in Ottawa because often we have issues with trees, and trees sometimes looking more important than new housing in the area. And you need to have a good arborist who will work with you. We have a few arborists, and I would say they're all great, and many of them, they used to work with developers, and well, they probably love trees when they choose this work, but they understand what you want, and they are really willing to cooperate with you. Often you and arborist fighting against the committee of adjustment about some of the trees on your property.
Or the
city forestry, yes.
Yeah. Geotechnical engineer, if you don't know, a geotechnical engineer, their expertise is soils and subsoil conditions. So everybody likes to think the ground they're going to put their house on is ideal for that. There are some areas of Ottawa where that's definitely not the case, and sometimes when you're going to do a severance application, you'll need to engage these professionals to help you with your application. I'll be right back. All right, and we're back. Sorry about that. Noise consultant.
That's appropriate.
So if noise considerations are relevant, and sometimes they are, I would say not nearly as often as you're asked to do things to address noise as a condition of severance, but we'll get to that in a couple more slides. Noise consultants can play a role for you there. Not all of these people are needed all of the time, but they're all needed at some point in time and for certain applications, and many of them are needed on just about every application. So one of our favorite topics, is how do your neighbors contribute to a committee of adjustment hearing? Your neighbors are usually opposed to minor variances and severances. I can't see everybody's faces, but NIMBY is the normal response of your neighbors. And if you've been involved in real estate or development for very long, you understand that NIMBY means not in my backyard.
Well, they also exist bananas,
yes,
which match to the color, in fact.
Exactly. And a banana is built absolutely nothing, absolutely nowhere. That's the actual
anytime.
Anytime. Anytime, yeah. Build absolutely nothing, absolutely nowhere, anytime. So they really oppose. I think if those people had their way, we'd still be in caves. And so some objections that we can get from neighbors. Impact on privacy. And we've heard, so the committee of adjustment meeting last Tuesday that we didn't, our application wasn't heard, it was postponed, but we sat and listened to a couple of others. And many people spoke about the fact that the potential development of a two-story house on a lot next to their two-story house was going to mean that that person could look down into their pool, and there was going to be a negative impact on their privacy.
Yeah. And it's okay for them to look in the other
neighbors, but not for neighbors to look in their backyard. So that's a concern. Profile is a concern, and we've often heard that they don't want renters, they don't want students, they don't want rooming houses, they don't want high density apartment buildings.
Immigrants.
Yeah, they don't want immigrants as well. Yep, that's another one.
Yeah.
We've heard all these things on camera at the committee, people saying they don't want that in their neighborhood, which, I mean, I'm floored by that, but yeah, that's a common complaint. Shadowing in sunlight, that
in our case, was this 11-meter building?
Yeah.
And sun above it?
Oh yeah. The lady across the street said, if they put an 11-meter high building there, I'll never see sun again. And she was like on the other side of the street, and I think there was 100 feet between the two buildings. So a 35-foot high building 100 feet away is not going to block out much sun. And it was she was due north, so the sun's going to be at its highest point when it's passing over the house across the street from her. But they still raise it. Aesthetic concerns is a common one. That's like that doesn't fit into our neighborhood and we don't want it here.
Yeah, we just
Because you
had
do
it.
have to do elevations and stuff if you're going to ask for a variance. So they're going to see, at least have an idea of what kind of building is going up there.
Well, last time our neighbors raised concern that it's gonna be, some said it's modern building, some said it's box looking building, and they wanted to be preserved as it was in 60s.
Yep. Noise and disturbance. So they don't like the idea of construction taking place. There's going to be messy. Their kids are going to eat the garbage. That was a genuine complaint.
Yes, and during when more density will be on a lot, if you put more than single family, it's also they raise concern that people will be occupying backyard and they'll be noisy.
Yep. Traffic and parking issues. If you're proposing to build with not sufficient off-street parking, then they're going to be upset that you're going to be parking on the street, or your visitors are going to be parking on the street. They're also going to have more cars driving up and down the street now
If
than
you
there
will
were.
build sufficient parking, then it will be too many cars on
Driveways.
on the
in the front yards.
driveways. Yes, so you
can't win.
cannot please
You
them.
can't win. Property values. There's a concern that the property values are going to go down because there's going to be construction in the area. Our experience has typically been that when the projects are finished, property values in the area go up because you have new development, and especially in the case where the infill becomes a popular or a financially viable thing in a neighborhood. The value of the rundown properties goes up significantly after there's competition amongst developers to get that. Drainage and flooding, and that's actually a legitimate concern. If you're going to redevelop a lot that was almost all grass, and you're going to put a large building and a bunch of hardscaping on it, water is going to go somewhere when it lands, and you don't want that to go to your neighbor's yard. Having said that, the city of Ottawa is pretty stringent about doing servicing and grading planning for any severance that they approve, and or that gets approved. Is one of the conditions that often comes up, which I'm skipping ahead a couple slides for. Same thing with variances. If you're going to apply for a variance, they're going to want to see your site servicing plan and your site drainage plan. There we go. Loss of green space. That's again, it's a funny one because it's your land, but people often don't want you to develop your land if it was all green grass before.
Well, if it was, we had cases that it would be overgrown forest looking lot, and when some developer comes and want to actually build the house or clear the lot and free the house that was there, neighbors don't want that just because they are opposed to any changes. And loss of green space is one of the reasons that they bring to committee at least.
Yeah, and sometimes you're actually asking for a variance that allows you to reduce the amount of green space that you have,
Yes.
either in your front yard or in your backyard, and then your neighbors are going to object to that. Compliance with zoning bylaws. Well, that one's an obvious one. It's the whole reason behind
The variance.
behind the variance anyway. And then community character. That again, it's like a heritage thing or aesthetic concerns that it wants you to fit in with the neighborhood. Yeah, those are the most common things that we hear from neighbors. Some are creative and come up with other stuff, but these are the ones that you're going to hear again and again and again when you're listening to your neighbors speak. Okay, the last topic before we stop the presentation and we'll take questions then is what are some of the conditions that can be included in approval of a severance application? And we specify severance here because at least our experience in Ottawa is there aren't usually conditions on a minor variance. You get a yes or a no. I want to reduce my lot width by this much. I want to increase my height by that much. Can I do it? Yes or no. However,
in rare cases, they can put a condition that you're not going for another variance after. Let's say you want to increase your height and they will tell that, well, you cannot put a balcony after that, or
rooftop
after-
terrace or
or something like this. Yes,
Yeah,
it was.
They can approve with a condition that you hadn't anticipated, like, yes, you can go the extra half meter high, but you're not allowed to put a rooftop terrace up there, that
yes.
kind of thing. But that's
This is the only one we at least heard. Yes.
Yeah. And that condition is, it's not something you have to come back and show them you've complied with. Whereas when you get a severance application with conditions, these are things that you have to satisfy the committee that you've done before the severance application is approved and complete. So let's see what kind of conditions can come up there. So site plan approval, depending on the scale of the project that you're doing, your severance can be conditional on getting site plan approval for your what's going to be there when you're done. Access and servicing for sure. Grading and drainage, I spoke to that a couple of slides ago, and that is almost guaranteed you're going to get that one. Environmental protection, again, depends on what you're doing, but you can be asked to make sure you protect sensitive areas. It's down there, so I won't talk about trees. So environment, like if there's a stream running nearby, they want to make sure you don't put pollutants in it, you don't put an undue amount of silt in it while you're doing your grading or your excavation on site. So things like that. Noise study, that one, at least for Ottawa, it's there's some of the busier streets have this condition that you either have to do a noise study or you have to agree that you will allow for an air conditioner to be installed so people don't have to open their windows in the summer.
Yeah, it's kind of come from 60s still, we think, but it's still there because I don't think anything built nowadays
doesn't allow for air conditioning.
AC, but we still encounter this.
And now, especially with those on the wall AC units, you can put an AC in any building, whether it was designed for it initially or not. Tree preservation is a usual condition, and they'll usually tell you things like if they're giving you permission to cut down 1 or 2 or 3 trees, you have to replant. Usually it's like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, either on your lot or somewhere nearby trees.
In the park, or sometimes you also have to pay.
Yep.
For it.
Correct. Architectural design. I myself haven't seen that one, but I do understand that in certain developments that they can set conditions that are applicable to the architectural design. Heritage conservation. That's heritage, by the way. Someone described this to me a couple months back, and it was perfect. They said heritage conservation is just another form of NIMBYism. It prevents change. And in the case of heritage conservation, if you're severing something that in a heritage area, you're going to have stipulations about maintaining the heritage designation of the property, or the piece of land that's being left behind, or the building on the land that's left behind. Fencing and screening, that's pretty self-explanatory, I think. Parking and accessory structures. For instance, we've had this experience ourselves where we're severing a piece of land. We have to take down the house that's on the land because the lot line passes through the existing building, and we wanted to leave the accessory building there because it was not on the lot line and it would have been useful for the new development. And we were told, no, when you take down the house, there's no longer allowance for accessory structures, so they have to come down.
Yes, because it's accessory to the house.
And when the house goes,
it cannot stay alone.
Exactly. Public access easements. So in certain cases, one of the conditions of severance is you may have to give an easement to hydro or a gas company or someone that's passing their services across your land. And those are not uncommon. Phasing requirements. If your severance is part of a large development, then, for instance, because severance comes in multiple forms. You can also have a plan of subdivision where you're cutting a big piece of land up into a whole lot of little pieces, and some of those are phased, and some of the conditions can be tied to that phasing. And oops, sorry, folks, didn't mean to do that. The last one is the not the most expensive, but it's the one you're guaranteed to have to spend money on. It's called cash in lieu of parkland, and it is a tax. The rationale behind the tax is that you're severing land, you're not adding any parkland, and for each lot created, there's an expectation that there's a certain amount of parkland dedicated to the neighborhood. Because you can't dedicate any parkland to the neighborhood, you get to pay cash instead of dedicating that parkland.
Yeah.
The lots that we've done so far, that tax comes in at around $20,000, give or take a few thousand. And that's our talk on severances. I'll stop sharing my screen. And we are happy to take questions that anybody might have. I'm also happy to hear if you've been to the committee, what your experience has been like there. See if it aligns with ours. Hi, Mark. I didn't see you come in.
Yes, great presentation. It's covers what my experience with the community of adjustment. So I don't want to take it off topic, but I just wanted to know if I missed the part at the beginning, if you covered about the new announcement today about the minimum of 4 units per.
Oh, we
per
did
lot.
not. But well, that it will be with the new bylaws, so we kind of anticipate.
Which won't be till
Yes,
March 2025 or end of 2025.
end of 2025.
I'm hearing the end of 2025, so to me that means sometime in 2026.
Yes, so we will plan for it. Let's put it this way, but we cannot implement it yet.
But you can plan for 4 units.
Yeah, we will plan
Absolutely, you
for
can.
all new developments. We're already planning for
'Cause
units. And it
My
is-
project right now is planning to do 3 units, and right now I want to change my plans to go with 4 units, but say, okay, well, we're issuing for 4 units, but the 4th unit won't be done until once the zoning is in effect.
Well, exactly. You just leave it unfinished.
Yep, unfinished. In our case, we have 2 projects right now that we're in the planning stages for, and our plan was to build because in each case we're allowed 11 meters high. It's not the project we went for the severance for that's in the presentation, but most of the suburbs of Ottawa, you're allowed to go 11 meters high, which is a full 3 stories. And we had plans for both those developments that it was going to be done slab on grade with 3 above grade stories. And we like to do that because it means nobody has to live in the basement. So you get better rents for that. However, if we're allowed 4 units, then we're going to put a
Somebody
basement
will have
and
to
someone's
live
going to
in the
live in the
basement.
basement because that still gives you rent. So now instead of being 3 stories above grade and on a slab, it's 3.5 stories above grade with a nice high basement. So people have there's an option to put a living space on the basement level as well.
Just being compliant with today's zoning of 11 meters, but that just that the 4th unit won't be finished until.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Correct. Yeah.
It
So
will
we'll
be
get
a
a building
finished
permit for
basement.
3 with a finished basement, and when the zoning allows us to do the 4th one, then we can.
You got all your plumbing and everything all your roughing is already done. So
That's correct.
Yes.
Yep. So your cost of your 4th unit will be mostly captured in your original build. You just have to frame it. Maybe you can even do the framing downstairs. Just don't cover anything in, and put your drywall up and do your finishing. So that's our thought on that anyway.
that's my thought too. I just want to know if we're on the same page. So anyhow, so sorry if I took it off
No,
topic a little bit. Just
that's
wanted
fair.
to-
It's very topical because the
very
announcement
exciting.
was just today, and we're pretty
Yes.
excited about that too.
Yes.
So that was our 2 beagles wanted to come in for a visit. They came in, walked around, now they've left. So does anybody have any other questions or experiences they would like to share? Most of our creative stuff comes from our neighbors. Nope. So I'll share a little background thing about us. The first 5 projects that we did, we were very careful to only buy properties that already had all the zoning and was 100% compliant in every way to what we wanted to do with it as part of our development. I even remember having a conversation with another developer about, nope, I'm not interested in going to the committee of adjustment. Takes time, costs money, and there's a risk someone will say no.
Yeah, so that way we were thinking that we eliminate the risk. And it is true to some point,
It's
but
true
when
completely.
it's no risk, it's no reward.
But exactly, the change in our thinking happened. So that first photo that you saw of Maria in her winter outfit standing in front of the snowbank with the sign, we had no plans to do a variance there. We had bought that property intending to do one thing with it, and discovered we couldn't do what we had planned to do, and we had to pivot. And as part of that pivot, we ended up in front of the committee of adjustment. We needed to do we needed variances for half dozen things. It was a pretty good list of variances that
and we still missed
requested.
one.
Yeah, true, we did. And that was our first experience with it. And following that successful committee of adjustment variance application, and we looked at what we got for the time and money that was invested, and we said, we need to change our thinking about this. The committee of adjustment is a risk, but it's balanced against an opportunity. And when you are able to conceive of something that is almost within the current zoning, but just that little stretch beyond, or you see a piece of land that's on sale for a fantastic price, but it's just a little bit non-compliant to what you'd like to do with the land as a development, considering going to the committee of adjustment as a way of overcoming that minor gap between what you want and what the land allows, or pushing what's allowed on the land a little bit by going to the committee, that can have a huge impact on the pro forma that you're going to put together for your project.
It's like they say, ask for what you want and be prepared to get it.
Exactly. Now that asking comes with some cost and some time. You need a survey. You need some preliminary planning from your architect. You need a planning rationale to be put together. But those are things that can happen in parallel with doing your detailed design of your building. So they don't necessarily have to add significantly to your project timeline. And they definitely can allow things that change the economics of a project for you. We were in front of the committee last Tuesday, so it'll be a week tomorrow, and we have to go back again because our request for parking wasn't compliant, and that's on us that we didn't plan that well enough. However, the variance we're asking for is the current zoning allows a 7-unit rooming house, and we're asking them to increase that number from 7 to 11. If you consider the revenue that you can get from 7 units and the revenue you can get from an additional 4, which is more than a 50% bump in revenue on your project, that has a huge impact on the economics of your project. So don't be afraid to think about asking to go a little beyond what the current zoning provides you with, because it can take what looks like a mediocre project, or even a project that's in the red and you wouldn't do it, and turn it into something that's worth doing, or something that's very much worth doing. So yeah, I was an advocate for risk avoidance early days, and now I'm an advocate for measured risk adoption.
Going to community adjustment is not like with a planner, with all the right people. You do your homework. It's not the biggest issue. It's fulfilling your conditions. The city is so slow and they move so slowly. It's just from my experience doing projects over 10 years ago, I wasn't experiencing that kind of delays and nonsense that we got to keep going through. It's just they make you jump through so many hoops, and they only issued about 61% of the permits that they were supposed to issue last year. So they got to cut the red tape, all the bureaucracy. You got a bunch of new hires, and they go through their checklist, and anyway, they just drag their feet. And just it used to be a lot streamer process. They have to streamline the process. The committee adjustment is, I don't have any issues with the committee adjustment. It's just it's after fulfilling the conditions, their timelines. it can take
Okay.
years. So,
It is understaffed and often the staff frequently changes when we fulfilling condition. We correspond with one person and then another comes along and we have to go almost
Start
from
again.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes, the same is permits.
Let me send you all the emails I sent to your predecessor so you're caught up.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it is
the
an
newbie and say, oh, I have to check, it's going to take, they don't get back to you. They don't give you a phone number. They work from home, no phone number. They just correspond by email and anyway, so just it's all the red tape. It's the nonsense we have to deal with these days.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that that those conditions of severance that come in your decision from the Committee of Adjustment, those conditions are not put there by the committee. Those conditions are put there by the city. So
Yep.
the city submits the conditions. You get a copy of them about 4 or 5 days, no, not 5, 3 or 4 days before you're going to appear in front of the committee. You get to see the list of conditions that your severance that are going to be tied to the severance that the city is willing to approve or willing to have the committee approve. They're not going to fight you on it. And then you don't get very much time really to say, is that reasonable or not? And have a discussion back and forth with the city.
Try to drill down what is implied, the conditions,
Yeah.
what the details of the conditions. Seems very simple, but then when you get into it, like a grading plan and that kind of stuff, then you find out, no, they want you, we just raised the house 32 inches and now they want us to raise all the grading. I spent another 10, 15 grand to redo all the grading. It's like, no. And you say, well, have you heard about the Rain Ready program? No. And you send the link. Well, I have to do my job. Yeah, all the grading, everything has to go to the street. Even though your grading's been like that for 70 years, going from
the front to the back.
It's sloping a lot. Your all your storm water has to go to all the water has to go to the storm system. You tell them, have you heard about the Rain Ready program? You're trying to minimize the amount of water going to the storm system. Nope, I don't care. That's the way you got to do it. So anyway, it's just all the frustration we have. I have to deal with it, and the next door neighbors has to deal with it. So we have to accept to put a catch basin. So we'll put a catch basin in the driveway. It'll cost you a few $1,000s to put a catch basin connected to storm. But they don't talk to each other. It's just anyway, the frustration, the nonsense. Community adjustment, I don't have any issues with community adjustment. Runs a lot smoother, especially now with Bill 23. So
yeah, not having your neighbors be able to hold you up by appealing was a big step. And Mark, I share your pain. We too are working through junior people at the city who have policy guidance, but not the ability or not the inclination to use a bit of common sense.
Yeah.
And and that's your life. But those things are more particular to dealing with the engineering department or the planning departments at the city.
The right away in the civil.
They're not specific to the Committee of Adjustment.
No.
However, be aware that those conditions that you get, if you have a problem with them, take the time to work it out before you accept them. And because once they're accepted, you don't have any leverage to negotiate anything with the city.
But when you go to community adjustment, you don't have time to drill down what exactly the details of those conditions. It's only once that's when you find out more how much nonsense they are. They keep asking for a lot of nonsense.
That's right. The week before we went to the committee, sorry, didn't you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, just curious, is there a timeline in which you have to accept or not accept or question?
Usually, you can write to them back, I suppose, but they are usually ask on the Committee of Adjustment if you're okay with conditions. If you say okay, that's it done often. If not, you can discuss it, and sometimes even divert it or change it on something. We had one with noise study. We just changed it to AC installation in the buildings, but for other ones, I don't know how this would be. I know the Mark was arguing about the conditions.
So the question about timeline.
But the timeline.
So I was going to speak
Yeah.
to that. So you normally your planner, because in our case it's always our planner that submits the application. our planner gets the conditions usually the Friday before you're going to go to the committee. So our particular committee meets on Tuesday. I think there's 2 Tuesdays and a Wednesday that the 3 different committees meet on. And it's usually the same week for all 3, but not at the same time. Some people sit on both committees or on more than one committee. So you will usually get your conditions the Thursday or Friday before you're going to go. You review them. If you have any concerns with what's been raised there, you have maybe 1 business day, at the most 2 business days, to try to get someone at the city to hear your concerns and maybe revisit the conditions. And if you're not able to get movement in that 1 or 2 days, and we've never had movement in that 1 or 2 days, I should say, then your solution is to postpone your application. It's called a sine die.
Adjournment.
It's an adjournment, sine die. So you're saying, you know, I'm not going to reapply or resubmit my application. I just want to postpone this one while I talk to the city about some of these conditions, and then you can go and have a meaningful conversation with the city about them. But it's going to be an impact to when your application gets heard by the committee.
So typically, you're losing, on average, you're losing about a month. You know, by the time you get postponed.
Okay.
Yeah, it can be anywhere from a month to 2
1.5
months. Depends on how long the queue is.
And how busy they are.
Because if you're in front of the committee, let's say on a Tuesday, on the first Tuesday of the month, there's usually enough people queued up that their next agenda is already full. And if the one after that's already full, then you're going to go back to the 3rd meeting, and they meet every 2 weeks. So it's like, if it's a really slow time, you may only be delayed 2 weeks. If it's a longer time, it could be 4, and sometimes it can be 6 or even longer if there's enough applications in front of yours.
That's kind of a bit surprising. I mean, not surprising, it is and it isn't, but yeah, that's why I was wondering where their timeline is, because if you've got your consultants and some things, I imagine, and you would know what that percentage would be, that it's like, yeah, okay, we get it, we can make those adjustments, we'll accept it. But like, how often, what kind of percentage are you looking at where you do have to postpone because you just don't have the time and you don't want to accept it?
Quite often, if you listen to Committee of Adjustment, you will see every time it can be like 10 to 30% sometimes of applications, they would be adjourned. So that means that they were scheduled before, and then they, for different reason, they would be postponed to a different date, another day.
Depends on the complexity. So if it's pretty simple,
Yeah.
if you got 12 conditions, you may be able to negotiate down to 10 conditions at the most. But quite often they're different departments, so they will. It says, well, we cannot, speak on behalf of this department. That's the legal department. That's this department. So they're trying to consolidate into one. No, you got all these conditions, even though they're overlapping. It's because they're different departments. They want to go through their funnels. So their process.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I was just curious. I'm not familiar, obviously, with the process. Why I'm here, wanting to learn. But yeah.
If you want a 10, I think it's the 10. It's all on YouTube. So maybe Van can share that with you, so you can listen to a lot of them, and it gives you a better idea. But if that's
I think I listened to 1 or 2, but it was at least a year or so ago. So yeah, no, thank you.
When Maria's in the kitchen, she'll often have it on in the background as entertainment. Because when the neighbors get on and start to speak, I mean, they're very emotional. For them, this is like a big deal, and they put their heart and soul into it. Some of the things they say are not appropriate, but you definitely know how they feel about it. It's like Jerry Springer television sometimes.
I remember Jerry Springer.
Yeah, I thought you'd get that context.
Oh yes, no, I'm old enough to get it.
Yeah. No, it's reality TV at its best.
Wow. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you very much for answering my question.
You're welcome. Nobody else? Okay. All right, folks. Well, thanks for coming out this evening and listening to us talk about a pretty dry topic. We appreciate that you joined us, And I think this is recorded, right, Jeff? Did you want to stop that recording now?
Yeah, of course.
All right.